The samurai warriors scattered like a tide of steel, each one hunting with lethal precision. Their voices rang out, demanding that he be found, no matter where he might be hiding. The command was absolute: track him down and end his life. Dozens of armored figures scoured the battlefield, their crimson eyes burning with the promise of death. They were many, and they would not stop until their blades were soaked in his blood. From within the cover of the forest, he crouched low, his body tense as a predator surrounded. His gaze swept across the relentless hunters, the truth pressing into him with suffocating weight. These warriors existed now for only one purpose: to kill him. And he knew with grim certainty, if he could not strike them down first, he would not live to see another moment. Through the trees, silent footsteps advanced, the samurai hunters spreading out like a net to ensnare their prey. Their presence filled the forest with a suffocating tension, the sound of steel brushing against armor echoing in the quiet. But it hadn't always been this way. Before the bloodshed, before the endless pursuit, his life had followed a different path. His name was Pyo Wall. He had been nothing more than a quiet, wandering man, one who lived simply, without ambition, without ever seeking the weight of destiny. The mountains stretched wide before him, the wind carrying the scent of flowers and pine, and his steps were light upon the earth. Back then, there was no one chasing him, no blood oaths hanging over his head. It was a time before everything changed. A time before he crossed paths with that person. When he opened his eyes again after a long slumber, there was no light, only endless darkness surrounding him. Each day inside that void was pure torment, as if he had been thrown into hell itself. The darkness was not empty. It was filled with others, desperate and ruthless, who tried to kill him before he could do the same to them. Every encounter became a struggle, every moment a battle for survival. And in that place, he was forced to fight with everything he had. Day after day, he had sharpened himself in that darkness, enduring pain, hunger, and fear until they became part of him. The boy who had once been weak and hunted was gone. He had taken on the mantle of those who had once ruled over the darkness. He had become an assassin. A cry pierced the night as someone spotted him. Another voice called from nearby, drawing the rest of the hunters in. Shapes emerged from the mist, their eyes glowing faintly as they encircled him. Yet the man in their midst did not falter. Standing still, his long dark hair veiling part of his face, he let the silence stretch before he moved. Inside, his resolve burned with a quiet fury. He told himself that he would endure, no matter the odds. He would survive the night, and when the time came, he would hunt them down, one by one, until none remained. In a bustling street lined with traditional houses, people moved about, selling goods and enjoying the day. Among them was a young boy carrying a basket filled with food, boiled eggs, meat, and vegetables. He proudly thought to himself that he had managed to buy enough to last the whole week, noting that since fish had been in season, prices were much lower. The boy, whose name was Pyo Wall, was 14 years old. He was an orphan, wandering from place to place with no family and no permanent home. As he walked, he suddenly noticed a strange man in the distance. The man's presence seemed deliberate, as though he had been waiting. Pyo Wall glanced in that direction, wondering who the person was. The man was tall, cloaked in dark robes, and wore a hat that hid most of his face. Before Pyo Wall could react, everything around him shifted into darkness. He found himself lying still, unable to see anything. Though his eyes were open, his vision was completely blocked. He realized he had been trapped somewhere with no light at all. The air was cold, and he couldn't sense any way out. He tried to move but discovered his body wouldn't obey him. His strength was gone. Confusion and fear churned in his mind. Why had this happened? The last thing he remembered was seeing that mysterious man earlier on the road. The memory replayed vividly, the stranger looking at him and remarking that he looked useful. Pyo Wall didn't know the man's name or identity, but he was certain this person had brought him here for some purpose. Yet, there was no sign of hostility, at least not the kind meant to kill, only some unknown goal. Alone in the darkness, Pyo Wall began repeating his own name in his head to keep himself calm. Time passed in a blur. He didn't know if he had lost consciousness or remained awake the whole time. Fear and loneliness pressed in on him, and hunger began to gnaw at his stomach. He wondered if he might die of starvation or thirst before anything else happened. His mind raced with questions. Why had the man done this? What did he want? Pio Wall had done nothing to provoke him. And yet, here he was, trapped in silence, waiting without answers. Pio Wall's mind burned with anger. Even if he was a nameless beggar with nothing, he thought, there was no reason for anyone to throw him into a place like this. Summoning all his effort, he twitched his fingers, forcing his hand to move. Tears streaked down his face as the sensation returned to his limbs. Slowly, he realized he could breathe more easily, and a spark of hope lit within him. His body's senses were coming back. A damp smell filled his nose, and the cold hardness of the ground pressed against his skin. He understood then, he was underground. Somewhere in the darkness, a faint dripping echoed. The sound of falling water made his thirst surge unbearably. He told himself he had to drink. With a guttural cry, he strained his body, dragging himself toward the sound. Each movement felt like it might tear him apart, but he kept pushing, just a little further. He fought through the pain, telling himself over and over that he had to survive. He would survive. Reaching out in the dark, his fingers brushed against rough stone. Feeling along the surface, he realized it was a wall, but no matter how hard he clawed at it, it didn't give. His strength failed, and he collapsed, panting in frustration. Then, from the silence, he heard footsteps approaching. The sound grew nearer until a pair of legs appeared before him. He lifted his gaze, heart pounding, and asked in a strained voice, who was standing there? A boy stood before Pio Wall, his face calm yet his words sharp. He asked why Pio Wall was trying so hard to survive. Pio Wall lay on the ground, looking up at him in silence. The boy's lips curled into a faint, mocking smile as he said it was laughable. He walked closer, his voice carrying a cold curiosity as he wondered aloud what could possibly make Pio Wall cling to life with such desperation. Then, with a sudden shift in tone, he leaned over Pio Wall and told him to give up. The boy leaned closer, his tone almost gentle as he said that if Pio Wall gave up, he would finally be at peace. Pio Wall's lips moved, his voice quiet as he asked if that would truly bring him peace. The boy seemed momentarily caught off guard. Pio Wall then made it clear, he had no intention of surrendering. Even if it meant enduring pain and hardship, he would survive. The boy scoffed, calling it a waste of strength, but Pio Wall's eyes held firm resolve. He said it would never be peace to die here without knowing who had brought him to this place. More than life itself, he refused to let his final moments pass without learning the identity of the one who had trapped him. Pio Wall's eyes sharpened with determination. He told himself that he would survive, no matter what it took. Even if he had to drag himself forward with the last of his strength, he would not die here. The voice asked if he was really going to keep trying, and he answered firmly that he would. When it questioned whether he would give up, he declared in his heart that he never would. The darkness around him seemed to deepen, but he stared ahead, resolute. Slowly, he lay back down against the cold ground, his body still but his will unshaken. Just as he had thought, no matter how hard he stared, there was nothing to be seen. Now that he was calmer, he wondered if he was imagining things, or perhaps he was truly starting to lose his mind. He suddenly sat up, shaking away the thought. He reminded himself that he had to survive. His eyes scanned the area and fell upon some moss growing on the damp wall. He remembered that moss could sometimes hold moisture, maybe even provide water. Approaching the wall, he studied it closely. He wasn't sure whether the moss was safe or poisonous, but he knew he had to try. Carefully, he brought a bit to his mouth. In the back of his mind, a voice urged him again. He had to try to survive. The moment the moss touched his tongue, he gagged and bent over, fighting the urge to spit it out. The taste was unbearable. He wondered how something could taste so horribly bitter. Yet, as the seconds passed, he realized his body felt fine. That meant it was edible. Forcing himself to push past the revulsion, he reminded himself again that he had to eat. He shoved more into his mouth, grimacing as the harsh taste coated his tongue. His stomach churned, but he endured. Inside, his determination hardened. He was going to survive, no matter what it took. Rising to his feet, he began to move again, each step echoing softly in the quiet, shadowed space. Pio Wall looked around and took in his surroundings. He noted to himself that this place, according to his calculations, was roughly a 3x3 jang space. Just as he had thought, he was trapped, with someone constantly watching him. As he paced across the floor, he suddenly heard a metallic sound. He stopped and focused, realizing the noise came from something ahead. His eyes fixed on the source, and he identified it. An iron door stood before him, illuminated from beyond. As the iron door opened, a blinding light poured through, forcing Pyo Wall to shield his eyes. The brightness was almost unbearable, yet he told himself he had to press on. He was nearly there, just a little further, when a shadow appeared before him. The sound of the door echoed once more, and the light vanished in an instant. Now standing alone in darkness again, he panted heavily, catching his breath. Then, a faint sound caught his attention, and he looked upward with wary eyes. Pyo Wall caught a faint scent in the air and wondered if it was food. Looking down, he spotted a bowl placed on the ground. He sniffed the aroma more carefully, recognizing the stench of rotten fish and tea leaves, mixed with perhaps some pork that had gone bad. Despite the foul smell, he reasoned that it was at least food, likely some sort of leftover stew. But the more he observed, the more he realized it was not just one bowl. Multiple portions lay scattered around, evidence that there were others here besides himself. This meant he was not the only one trapped in this place. He concluded that 5 or more people had trapped him inside for a specific purpose. If that were the case, then it was likely they had no interest in targeting him alone. It would be inefficient to create such a large trap just for one person. Therefore, there had to be at least 5 managers in total. Pyo Wall reasoned that more than 5 people were probably in the same situation as he was. His expression hardened as a thought echoed in his mind. Just what was their true goal? He caught the scent of hot spices and pork. After a brief sniff, he realized it was Sichuan food. His body tensed for a moment, but then he relaxed. There was no need to rush, he still had plenty of time. Eating now would be better than going hungry, and at the very least, it was better than the foul smell from before. Once he had finished, his eyes sharpened again, his mind returning to the matter at hand. Time passed in confinement. Pyo Wall kept his body active, pushing himself through intense exercise routines on the cracked stone floor. It had been at least 4 months since he had been trapped in this place. Once a day, without fail, a small door would open just enough to slide in food. Each time it happened, he would rush toward it, pounding on the walls and frame in an attempt to break through, yet the door always closed before he could act. Other than providing food, his captors never spoke a single word to him. They kept him locked away in this narrow, dark space without explanation. He would sometimes shout in frustration, slamming himself against the ground, his voice echoing in the void. At first, he thought such isolation would drive him to madness, but over time, something changed. Little by little, his eyes adjusted to the darkness, allowing him to make out faint details of his surroundings. His body and mind had grown used to the pitch-black confinement, and now he could discern shapes and movements in this underground space that had once been invisible to him. Sitting in the dim silence, he began to notice movement. Countless insects crawled across the cracked stone floor, strange, considering how little light reached this place. Among them, he spotted something unsettling: long, jointed bodies skittering closer. Centipedes? He thought, their countless legs twitching in eerie unison. But then, something far larger slid into view, a smooth, glistening, scaled form coiling across the ground. His instincts screamed, and his body tensed as the realization struck. A snake. And not a small one. His breath sharpened, muscles coiling as the serpent's cold, scaly body slid around him. The snake's crimson eyes locked onto him, its tongue flicking out with a chilling hiss. Then, it suddenly bit Pyo Wall on the arm. Gritting his teeth, he fought against the crushing force, a guttural scream tearing from his throat as pain shot through his body. Summoning every ounce of strength, he gripped his arm, struggling against the agony. His breaths came ragged and uneven, pain flaring in sharp bursts. The bite still throbbed, an unnatural heat spreading from the wound. His hand trembled as he pressed against it, eyes narrowing in sudden realization. Snake venom? The agony intensified, his body convulsing as the toxin surged through his veins. A raw, primal scream escaped his lips. In the dim, suffocating dark, a bowl lowered from above, its faint shimmer catching his eye. He grabbed it with shaky hands, the cool touch a tiny comfort against his burning skin. Gasping for breath, he glared ahead, clinging to the thought, "I'm not going down here." But then, two glowing red eyes lit up the darkness, staring right at him. Pyo Wall sat on the cold, cracked ground, clutching his head as if trying to block out the world. A faint, slithering sound echoed through the darkness, and a pale serpent emerged. Pyo Wall had nearly died from the snake's venom before, but he thought some sort of change had occurred within his body during the detoxification process. Slowly, he lifted his gaze, staring at the creature without fear. He found the serpent fascinating, but wondered if it was truly because of this guy. He had heard stories of people growing stronger after surviving poison. He thought that if he could gain resistance to poison, if he could gain a weapon, then perhaps it would be worth it. With that thought, he let the snake bite his arm. The venom spread from his arm to his shoulder. Doubt crept in. Perhaps he shouldn't have done this, perhaps he should have been more cautious. His entire body felt like it was on fire. And yet, he thought it wasn't as bad as the first time he had been bitten. A snake gazes forward, its cold, unblinking eyes fixed ahead. Those eyes, crafted for darkness, are sharp and deceptive, always hunting. It moves with calculated patience, steadily drawing closer to its prey. At times, it even strikes at creatures outside its usual range, yet never with excess. Once its hunger is sated, it does not linger or waste energy chasing after what escapes. Butterflies drifted gently through the dim air, their fragile wings a stark contrast to the serpent's cold, gleaming scales. Among them sat Pyo Wall, calm and unmoving, his gaze fixed on the snake as it slowly slipped away. A faint rustling sound fills the air, brushing softly against the silence. Pyo Wall, alert, turns his head toward the source. Footsteps carry him forward, his eyes cautious yet intent. His gaze sharpens, body tensing as anticipation takes hold. Before him stands a sturdy door. His heart beats faster as realization strikes, the door has opened. Beyond the open doorway stretches a dim, cracked stone corridor. Without hesitation, Pyo Wall dashes forward, sandals striking the cold floor. He notes the distance in his mind. The next room lies 20 steps ahead. That must be why he couldn't sense the presence of others. Pausing at the threshold, he peers through with sharp, focused eyes. A faint scent drifts toward him, stirring an instinctive reaction. His breath stills, and his gaze narrows as recognition strikes. That smell. He knows it. On the cold stone floor lay a lifeless body, its presence heavy with the stench of rotting flesh. Pyo Wall recognized it instantly, the foul odor clinging to the air. He couldn't see much detail, but from the build, the person appeared to be around his age. He wondered if it was the same in the other rooms. Quickening his pace, he moved through the dim corridor. Soon, he halted before another doorway, standing still as the weight of what lay ahead settled over him. He pushes the door open, and it creaks as it moves. Stepping inside, he looks around the dark room. In the shadows, a figure is faintly visible. He stares at them, his eyes calm but serious, as silence fills the space. Pyo Wall stood in the doorway, looking straight ahead. In the room, two people sat together. He watched them for a moment, then began walking forward, his footsteps steady. Reaching another corridor, he noticed something. It was the same thing he had seen before. The woman in the room noticed Pyo Wall and called out to him, asking where he had come from. She explained that she and the man beside her were the only survivors there. Pyo Wall realized she was looking in his direction, though she couldn't actually see him in the darkness. It seemed to him that he was the only one who had fully adapted to it. He introduced himself, explaining that he had been trapped in the adjacent sector. The woman asked if he was saying there were more places like this, and Pyo Wall replied that it appeared so. She then introduced herself as Yo Wall, and the man beside her as Chianwoo. With little else to discuss, Pyo Wall told them they should leave. Confused, the woman asked where they were supposed to go. Pyo Wall replied that there were probably more places like this. Soon, they found a large closed door. They were surprised to see it, realizing there really were others. Pyo Wall told them to follow him. Yo Wall extended her hand, telling Chianwoo to hold it since it was dark. Chianwoo accepted, and together they followed Pyo Wall. As they pushed the heavy door open, more people were revealed inside, their faces turning toward the newcomers. While Yo Wall explained the situation to them, Pyo Wall checked the surroundings. Unlike the place he had been, few here had starved to death. After noticing certain marks, he concluded that many had committed suicide instead. He also observed that there were more bowls and food here than in his sector. He wondered if there had been discrimination. Pyo Wall questioned what reason they could possibly have for managing the sectors unequally. Suddenly, Yo Wall called him over, telling him these people had also been trapped around the same time. As they moved forward, Pyo Wall led the way while everyone followed. Eventually, they reached another door. Pyo Wall pushed it open, and a bright light burst through, dazzling their eyes and forcing them to cover their faces. For a moment, he thought it might be the outside, but no, they were still underground. They had been in darkness for so long that even the light from a torch blinded them. Pyo Wall stood at the end of a stone pathway, flanked by rocky walls with torches burning on either side. He clutched his side while others groaned in pain. The scene widened, showing him heading toward a large gate at the end of the path. Pyo Wall and the others walked in the same direction. At the doorway, he pushed it open and raised a hand in a silent gesture of greeting, though no one stood beyond. The emptiness drew puzzled looks from those nearby. His gaze swept over the surroundings. The structure was fragile and hastily built, made solely for appearances. The interior was poorly constructed, lacking care or craftsmanship. The reason for such shoddy work puzzled him. A young girl approached, introducing herself as Lee Min and declaring her intention to remain by his side. Her sudden closeness left him momentarily stunned. She studied his face with unusual interest, touching his cheek as if to confirm something she had noticed. Her attention was fixed on the faint red in his pupils. The color stirred thoughts in Pyo Wall's mind, memories of the snake bite and the unsettling possibility that it had altered him. In a place like this, any difference could be dangerous. Lee Min's observation that the red hue only appeared clearly in torchlight brought him a quiet sense of relief. She regarded him as different from the other children, noting his tendency to think while the rest wandered in confusion. He neither confirmed nor denied her words, allowing the thought to linger between them. Before long, Yowal and Qianwu arrived, interrupting the moment. They spoke of the other children's decision to stay together and asked about his choice. Pyo Wall responded with patient indifference, preferring to watch events unfold before making any decision. Lee Min, however, accepted the offer immediately, reasoning that cooperation increased the chances of survival. Observing them, Pyo Wall sensed the toll isolation had taken. Too much time in darkness had left scars on their minds that could not be erased. He doubted their stability, and perhaps his own. For now, he resolved to remain apart, watching from a distance. Before long, the children began to recognize each other's faces. Small groups started to form, one led by Yowal and Qianwu, another by Kong Il, a third by Yom Iljing, and another under Go Yongsan. Pyo Wall, however, remained alone. The other boys whispered about him, wondering how he had survived alone in his block. Their curiosity grew even more because he refused to join any group. Pyo Wall noticed the gossip, but it only reminded him that people everywhere behaved the same. For now, he ignored them and studied the stone walls around them. He realized the dungeon was ancient, but parts of it had been rebuilt recently. That meant their captors had enormous resources, far more than any ordinary person could have. His thoughts were cut short when a sudden light appeared above. A large basket slowly descended from the ceiling. Everyone froze, unsure of what was happening. When the basket reached the ground, they saw it was filled with food. The children rushed forward with excitement, desperate to eat. But Yowal and Qianwu stopped them, insisting the food be shared fairly. Some children grew angry, but the girl calmly suggested that the group leaders should divide it among everyone. Pyo Wall then stepped forward, saying he would take his share as well. As he reached for the basket, Iljing blocked him. With a threatening tone, Iljing declared that no one could touch the food without his permission. He insisted that everything in the basket belonged under their control. At those words, Pyo Wall's eyes narrowed. In a flash, he struck Yo Iljin across the face, leaving deep wounds that bled heavily. Shock spread through the crowd as Pyo Wall forced him to the ground, demanding he repeat what he had just said. Iljing cried out in pain, but Pyo Wall pressed harder, asking again. The children shouted angrily, calling him a madman. But Pyo Wall ignored them and pressed even harder, as if to crush the boy's face. Many believed he had lost his mind. Then Yo-wol stepped forward and calmly asked Pyo-wol to release Yo-iljin, saying the boy had surely learned his lesson. Before letting go, Pyo-wol demanded his share of food. Yo-wol promised that no one would touch it, and the other leaders agreed. Finally, Pyo-wol released Iljing, warning him that if he continued, he would lose his other eye as well. Iljing cursed him, but Pyo-wol paid no attention. The food was soon divided, and the children ate eagerly. Pyo-wol sat apart with his portion, watching them from a distance. He understood that this was all a test designed to filter out the useful ones. From the start, their captors had planned for many of them to die. As he ate, he accepted that these children were not allies but future enemies. Later, Yo-wol approached him. She asked if he was all right and mentioned that many had left Iljung's group after the incident. Pyo-wol pointed out that her own group had grown the largest. She smiled, surprised that he had been observing everything despite keeping his distance. He replied calmly that just as they were interested in him, he was interested in them. Pyo-wol soon understood why the children trusted her. She always made sure others ate first while she ate last. She stood apart from the other leaders. Yo-wol then asked why he continued to live alone in the dark room, noting that the other children were afraid of him. Pyo-wol answered that he simply preferred it. His body had grown stronger against poison, and the snake bites on his arm no longer hurt as much. Yo-wol pressed him again to join her group, but Pyo-wol reminded her that he had already given his answer. She argued that he once said he would think about it, but he gave no reply. Before the conversation could continue, another basket descended. This time, when they opened it, they were shocked. It was only half full. Yo-wol stared in disbelief, while the other leaders argued. But Pyo-wol quietly realized the truth. The real game had just begun. Mok Nosum was the one who had survived the last block and joined Yo-wol's group. He was the weakest among them, but his persistence had earned him a place. One day, however, he was found lifeless. The others were deeply upset, swearing that they would never forgive whoever had done it. Still, everyone knew the truth. He had died because he was the weakest. His body was covered with a cloth for a small farewell. Qianwu burned with fury, vowing revenge if they ever discovered the killer. But Yo-wol remained cold. To her, what mattered was not who killed him, but the fact that someone in their group had died. Her eyes hardened as she declared they should retaliate in the same way. Watching quietly, Pyo-wol understood what this meant. The weakest of each group would be targeted next. Soon enough, another boy from Go Yongsun's group was found dead. That was only the beginning. One by one, children from every group, Yo-wol's, Iljung's, Yongsun's, and Kong Il's, kept dying in the nights that followed. Trust disappeared. Fear and suspicion twisted the children, turning them into something like demons. Meanwhile, Pyo-wol continued to eat the moss on the walls. It was foul, and he never grew used to it, but it kept him alive. The others had not yet reached this level of desperation. Pyo-wol knew peace would not last long. One night, he heard footsteps. 4 people were approaching. They weren't lost, they were after him. At the head was Iljing, his red hair bright even in the dim light. Grinding his teeth, he came seeking revenge, claiming Pyo-wol had already destroyed 2 of his men. This was his chance to settle the score. As they moved through the dark corridor, one of his followers suddenly screamed. No one saw what happened. The boy said he had been bitten, then collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Panic spread. Iljing shouted for them to stay alert, but before long, another of his men vanished in the darkness. Pyo-wol moved like a shadow. He seized one of the remaining boys, Janga, gripping him by the neck. Iljing raged, demanding Pyo-wol release him. But Pyo-wol only stared coldly, tightening his hold. Janga struggled and coughed, on the verge of death. For a brief moment, Pyo-wol hesitated. Then he decided, sooner or later, someone had to die. He snapped Young-ho's neck, letting the body fall to the ground. Now only Iljing remained. Furious, he lunged at Pyo-wol, but every strike missed. In his blind rage, he suddenly realized Pyo-wol had vanished. He spun around, demanding to know where he was. Then a whisper came from behind. One eye would not be enough this time. Terrified, Iljing ran, but soon reached a dead end. When he turned, Pyo-wol was walking toward him. Cold sweat ran down his body. Desperate, Iljing begged him to join forces. He promised survival would be easier together and even offered to serve as Pyo Wall's subordinate. Pyo Wall listened silently, then said that even if Yo Iljin submitted, he would eventually betray him again. Iljing clung to life, swearing he would never dare to cross him. But Pyo Wall had already made his choice. In one swift move, he struck, slipped behind him, and locked his arms around his neck. Iljing cried, his eyes rolling back as he begged for mercy. But it was too late. His body went limp, collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud. Pyo Wall looked down at him and muttered that he had been destroyed because he was still weak. Then, with eyes glowing red in the dark, he vanished once again into the shadows. Iljung's group was disbanded after he and his followers were found lifeless. The remaining leaders were shocked and angry at the same time. All of them shared the same thought: it was Pyo Wall's doing. Yo Wall could hardly imagine how strong he must be to take down 4 people alone. Kong Il realized it was best not to cross him. Yongsan also thought about what had happened. He saw that Pyo Wall was not only ruthless but clever, using fear itself as a weapon. Yongsan decided it was time to cut down on food consumption, but that only meant more fighting. Children began destroying one another just to survive. Pyo Wall had done it to Iljing, one of the most feared among them, and because of that, Yongsan was sure no one would dare touch him. He warned his companions to stay away from Pyo Wall, and they obeyed without question. To Yongsan, nothing was scarier than someone with nothing left to lose. Their talk was interrupted when one boy rushed in, reporting that 2 children were hiding in the Red Pavilion in the north. He suspected they were the ones expelled from Yo Wall's group. Yongsan doubted him at first, but the boy insisted he had checked carefully. He also added that the 2 were holding potatoes and warned that they might eat them all if they didn't hurry. The others rejoiced at the thought of food, but Yongsan hesitated. It felt foolish to risk lives over a potato. Still, he ordered his men to prepare. Soon they stood outside the pavilion, where 2 boys, Yo Wall's former companions, sat with potatoes in hand. At the sight, Yongsan's subordinates turned into hungry beasts. They charged forward, shouting to kill and take the food. The 2 boys panicked and ran, while the crowd chased after them, screaming for the potatoes. Yongsan stood back, uneasy. Something about it felt like a trap. He was right. After a short distance, one of the boys whistled, and suddenly armed fighters leapt out from hiding. Yongsan shouted for his men to stop, but it was too late. His followers were cut down one after another. Desperate, Yongsan ordered a retreat, but then he too was surrounded. A woman's voice rang out, mocking that a big fish had been caught for the price of a potato. It was Yo Wall and Qianwu. Yo Wall declared that today, they would reduce the number of mouths to feed. Yongsan's heart filled with rage. He demanded how she dared to betray them like this, but Yo Wall only smiled. Realizing he would not survive, Yongsan asked her for a final favor. She listened but made it clear she would not spare much food. Grinding his teeth, he asked if she would only be satisfied by killing everyone. Yo Wall replied coldly that if he were in her place, he would do the same. Then she ordered her people to slaughter the survivors. The battle began. Yongsan fought fiercely, even clashing with Qianwu, but he was soon overwhelmed. From the rooftops, Pyo Wall watched in silence. He noticed how Yo Wall skillfully used the terrain and traps to her advantage. The entire structure was designed with strong defenses, almost like a real fortress. As he observed, Pyo Wall came to a chilling conclusion. The place had been built to strip away their humanity, forcing them to kill until it became second nature. One day, those who survived here would be unleashed in the real world. They were being molded into perfect assassins. Meanwhile, some children from Yo Wall's group laughed as they remembered how Yongsan's group had been wiped out. They enjoyed how their victims struggled before death, praising Yo Wall as the best leader. Yo Wall herself celebrated the victory, and no one dared oppose her. But Li Min sat quietly, unhappy. She stared at her hands, still smelling of blood. Unlike the others, she could not accept how easily they ate with blood-stained fingers. Hugging herself, she thought it was all disgusting. Tears welled in her eyes as guilt gnawed at her. She felt she had helped ruin countless children. Suddenly, the ceiling lit up again, and the children wondered if food was coming so soon. Yowal urged her followers to take as much as they could, confident that no group remained to oppose them now that Yongsun was gone. She smiled at the thought of finally eating enough, but her mood shifted when she noticed Yowal nearby. His face twisted in a grimace of fear. Yowal turned to see what alarmed him, and behind her, Xianwu wore the same expression. Then came a noise. Instead of food baskets, countless assassins in cloaks appeared. Weapons flashed as they attacked. Screams echoed as terrified children begged them to stop, but the slaughter continued. Even Yowal was caught in the chaos. On the floor, Yowal stayed still. He had suspected something like this, yet the reality was harsher than he imagined. He realized they had been kidnapped through violence from the beginning, treated worse than animals. He resolved not to stand out. Soon, 3 masked figures entered, their robes almost identical. Numbers marked their masks: 1, 2, and 3. Yowal stared at them in dread, realizing these were the true masters the assassins obeyed. The man with the 1 mask raised his palm, and the killers stopped at once. He declared himself the first sword and said all the children's lives now belonged to him. When one child shouted in protest, an assassin beheaded him instantly. The first sword warned that speaking without permission would mean death. Yowal clenched his teeth. He understood now. They were like Kadoku, poisonous insects trapped together until only the strongest survived. The first sword and his companions had chosen the most ruthless to remain. He asked the man with the 2 mask who among the children stood out most. The answer was Yowal. She had the largest following and strong influence. If not crushed early, her spirit would become dangerous. The first sword agreed and ordered special attention be given to her. He also mentioned Qianwu and Kong Il, who, though overshadowed, showed strong martial potential. Finally, the first sword asked about the sole survivor from Sector 1, Yowal. The second confirmed he was still alive. The first sword noted that Sector 1 had the harshest conditions and least food, so any survivor from there could not be ordinary. He ordered close watch on Yowal. Then he spoke of their mission. They had 6 years left to complete it. He pulled out a golden scroll, marked only for the captain of the Blood Shadow Group. It revealed the request: the destruction of their target within 7 years, leaving no trace behind. The reward: 500,000 gold yang. A masked man wearing the number 3 mask stepped forward and told the children to listen. He pointed to a house at the far edge and said it was their target. Whoever reached it first would earn a 2-hour break, but whoever came last would learn what true terror meant. Without hesitation, the children rushed toward the house, desperate not to waste a moment. The brutal days went on. Their lives became nothing but harsh training meant to turn them into assassins. Yowal knew that if they failed to endure, they would die before ever seeing the outside world again. Survival meant giving everything. Among them, Yowal stood out the most. Her intelligence, caution, courage, and leadership were unmatched. Yowal, however, remained ordinary. Reports even said he had done nothing remarkable. This made the first sword wonder if he had misjudged him, since Yowal was the only survivor from the first sector. Still, he ordered the boy to be watched closely. One day, Yowal approached Yowal and was surprised to see him still reading the thundersplitting cultivation technique. She said their mentors no longer forced them to study it, but Yowal replied that he wanted to continue. She yawned, asked if he was never tired, and then left, telling him to enjoy his reading. The technique itself was simple, something even inexperienced students could learn. Masked Man 3 had given them 3 months to master it, saying that those who reached the first stage would be reborn with bodies able to sense chi and store energy. Most believed no one could truly master it, but Yowal thought differently. He suspected that cracking the thunder did not mean real lightning, but the speed of thought. If he approached it his own way, he might gain something unique. Still, he reminded himself not to show too much. Survival meant never standing out, at least, until now. During a sparring match, Yowal dodged a punch. His opponent, a crazed youth with a dagger, laughed and attacked wildly. Yowal quickly realized this was no training, the boy was trying to kill him. The mad youth admitted as much, saying real fights were more fun. With a twisted grin, he lunged again, daggers flashing from hidden angles. Yowal defended calmly, blocking each strike. His opponent grew fiercer, even throwing blades with deadly precision. Pyo Wall dodged them one by one, but the madness in the boy's eyes only deepened. Soon, Masked Man 3 noticed the fight and watched with surprise. Despite the chaos, Pyo Wall did not look tired. His opponent laughed, impressed that he had blocked everything, but demanded that Pyo Wall fight back instead of only defending. Charging forward again, he expected another clash. Instead, Pyo Wall dropped his dagger and walked straight toward him. Both his opponent and Masked Man 3 were caught off guard, thinking he had surrendered. But as the mad youth closed in, Pyo Wall struck first, landing a fierce kick to his stomach. The boy collapsed, coughing blood, while Pyo Wall stood over him with cold determination. Not long after, Masked Man 2 reported to the First Sword that the children's growth had exceeded expectations. At this pace, their mission could be completed in 5 years instead of 7. But the First Sword warned against underestimating their target, a man said to be the most gifted in all Sichuan. Even perfect preparation might not be enough. One mistake could mean the destruction of the entire Blood Shadow group. That was why they trained kidnapped children mercilessly, so the mission would not fail, even if they themselves did. The First Sword then ordered the training to intensify. Many children would die, but those who survived would become even stronger. Meanwhile, Pyo Wall and his crazed opponent fought on. Pushed too far, Pyo Wall finally broke his enemy's arm. The boy screamed in agony, clutching his shattered limb, while the masked mentors looked on. Even behind their masks, it was clear they were shocked at Pyo Wall's strength. The masked mentors gathered around Pyo Wall, staring at the broken boy on the ground. They wondered if Pyo Wall had truly done this. A question crossed Pyo Wall's mind. Why had the mentors come here? Still, he gave them a firm answer. The First Sword said nothing more. He drew his weapon and suddenly placed the sharp edge against Pyo Wall's shoulder, its point so close to his face that a shiver ran through him. The blade had moved too fast for the eye to follow. Pyo Wall realized that a single mistake would mean instant death, because to the mentors, they were nothing but tools. After a tense pause, the First Sword withdrew his sword and turned away. As he walked off, he warned Pyo Wall never to leave traces behind. Breaking an opponent's arm revealed too much. It told enemies who he was and what kind of martial arts he practiced. He repeated the lesson firmly: an assassin must never leave a trace. Around them, the children slowly dispersed, fear written on their faces. Pyo Wall wiped the sweat from his brow, his emotions boiling inside. 6 years passed. The training grounds had changed, left in ruins. In the middle of the chaos, a cloaked man stood scanning the area. He stabbed his sword into the floorboards, and a sharp scream echoed. Someone had been hiding below. The man told the terrified youth that if he had been a real enemy, the boy would already be dead. Shaking his head, he moved on. He soon found another boy just as easily and sighed with disappointment. Their turtle breathing technique was too crude. Their hiding was not yet convincing. He thought they were not prepared at all. He had been ordered to find 5 people, but no matter how hard he searched, he could sense only 4. Then, frustration took over. Striking his weapon against the ground, he ordered the missing one to come out. To his shock, the planks beside him stirred. Someone had been hiding right under his nose, yet he had not sensed a thing. When the youth revealed himself, the assassin stopped questioning it, because it was Pyo Wall. Calmly, Pyo Wall asked if training was finally over and if he could rest. The assassin hesitated, then gave a reluctant answer. Pyo Wall turned and walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving the man staring after him in disbelief. Not long after, Pyo Wall reached the resting place. By the fire sat Yowal, Qianwu, and Gyeoksun, whose arm Pyo Wall had once broken. They were eating together. Gyeoksun sneered, asking why Pyo Wall had come this far. Pyo Wall looked at him and asked if he had changed his face again. The boy laughed. It was true. He wore Yu Quangen's face since the real one had died. Pyo Wall only remarked that Go Yongsun would soon forget what his real face even looked like. He added that it didn't matter anyway, since they were never meant to leave this place. His words unsettled Pyo Wall slightly, though he tried to brush it off. As they ate, Yowal noticed the food tasted a little better than before. Her expression darkened. She realized what that improvement meant. Soon, they would be given a real mission. Meanwhile, in the study, the first sword sat alone. Only here could he remove his mask and breathe freely. Beneath the mask was an elderly man named Lim Sayil. He reflected on the past 6 years. Out of 300 children, only 30 had survived, becoming killers who destroyed others to live. The world of Jianghu was cruel. One had to take lives or lose their own. Compared to his own childhood, the children here were better off, yet such thoughts made Lim Sayil uneasy. He felt that growing too emotional was a sign his end might be near. Before long, the other 2 mentors entered. The third sword noticed Lim Sayil's unmasked face and questioned him. Lim Sayil explained that it was simply difficult to breathe with the mask on, and after 6 years, he suggested they also remove theirs. Surprised at first, the 2 obeyed. Beneath the masks, they were just ordinary men, Ji Shinhang, the second sword, and Sang Ilshan, the third. Lim Sayil brought out wine, saying such moments were better faced with alcohol. As they drank, he remarked that nearly 7 years had passed, and if nothing went wrong, they could soon send the children away. Still, he wanted to know how the children were progressing. The others admitted the kids had exceeded all expectations. Some were even stronger than the mentors themselves, so much that they were difficult to control. It seemed wasteful to discard them after only 1 use, but Lim Sayil reminded them they had no choice. Their employer's orders were absolute. It was time to begin the final stage. The mentors gathered the children and placed a large book before them. Lim Sayil explained that 3 of them would learn these powerful martial arts techniques. The remaining 27 would then be tasked with killing the 3 who had learned them. Shock and fear spread across the children's faces. They could hardly believe their mentors would remain so cruel to the very end. Lim Sayil concluded that this would be their final training. Once it was over, they would not be forced to do anything more until they were released. His words planted both hope and doubt in their hearts. Yowal quickly realized the truth. If they sacrificed 3, the rest could live until they were set free. Pyo Wall, however, saw the bait for what it was. The ones who learned the techniques would become living targets. He guessed that the martial arts might even be traps, designed to draw out strengths and weaknesses for destruction. Despite this, Pyo Wall raised his hand. Calmly, he volunteered to learn the techniques. Yowal was startled, asking if he truly meant to make himself a scapegoat. But Pyo Wall only replied that time would reveal whether he was a goat or a wolf. Yowal warned him to be careful and reminded him that this choice made him everyone's target. Pyo Wall only smirked, saying he'll look forward to it. Soon after, a grim scene unfolded. Strange sounds filled the pavilion, and Qianwu suddenly drove his sword into another boy, killing him. He apologized afterward, but the boy had been chosen by lot to learn the techniques. Qianwu had no other choice. That left only one more candidate, and it was Pyo Wall. So Gyeoksan, still wearing another stolen face, looked on with amusement. Meanwhile, Li Min nervously asked if Pyo Wall was the last one left. They realized he had not been seen for some time, but Yowal was sure he was still nearby. She remembered sparring with him days earlier. Strangely, she had found him more dangerous unarmed than with a sword, and she regretted ever giving him advice. Her thoughts were interrupted when So Gyeoksan suggested turning against the mentors instead of killing Pyo Wall. To his surprise, Qianwu agreed, though he doubted their mentors would be without countermeasures. Yowal added that restrictions must have been placed on them, and the others agreed they should first find a way to remove those limits, while also tracking Pyo Wall. The group set out together, leaving behind the corpse of the fallen boy. From the shadows, a silhouette appeared. It was Pyo Wall. He watched them go, noting their reckless plan. Looking down at the lifeless body, he gently closed the boy's eyes, a small act of kindness. He knew the mentors were likely watching the children now. If so, this might be his only chance to uncover their true intentions. After some time, Pyo Wall reached the temporary base of the mentors. Guards stood everywhere, but he knew they were not enough to stop him. His body seemed wrapped in a dark aura as he recalled the turtle breathing technique, which warned that movement would break its effect. Instead, he combined it with the thunder-splitting technique, allowing him to divide and hide his breath. By pushing his presence to the absolute limit, he slipped past the guards unnoticed, like a shadow. Moving deeper into the base, he reached a grand door at the farthest point. Inside was a study with a round table and 3 chairs. Curiosity drove him to search. As he flipped through books and documents, questions filled his mind. Who were these mentors? Why were they raising children as assassins, and was there any way out of this place? In a nightstand, he found a golden scroll wrapped with care. Opening it, he discovered an order. It explained the mentors' mission, their goals, and the rewards awaiting them. At the end was the name of the man behind it all, Wu Gunsang. Pyo Wall wondered what kind of person held such power to orchestrate 7 years of ruthless training, where only 30 of 300 children had survived. Anger stirred within him at the thought. Before he could dwell on it, footsteps approached. The first sword, Lim Sayel, flung open the study doors with force, but the room appeared empty. Though Pyo Wall had erased his traces, the man sensed someone had been there. Soon, the second and third swords arrived, surprised by Lim Sayel's grim expression. He told them an intruder had entered his room. When asked who it could be, he admitted that only one child possessed such skill, Pyo Wall. Unseen above them, Pyo Wall clung to the ceiling, listening. The mentors argued about what to do. Punishing him without proof could turn the children against them, but letting him go was too dangerous. Finally, Lim Sayel decided. He would use the Hell Flute, a last resort meant to show the children who truly controlled their lives. The others hesitated but agreed. Soon after, Li Sol stood on a hill near the children's quarters, holding a flute in his hands. With it, he would unleash hell. Meanwhile, Yo Wall, Qianwu, and the others were searching desperately for Pyo Wall, but none could find him. Even the best trackers failed, leaving them puzzled. Just then, a strange melody filled the air. The children clutched their chests and collapsed in pain. Yo Wall too felt the crushing sensation and fell, while cries of agony echoed all around. Li Min wept on the ground, feeling as though insects were devouring her from within. Amid the chaos, footsteps approached her. Pyo Wall appeared, standing silently over her. He realized then what had happened. The mentors had finally activated the restriction. The sharp ringing sound that made all the other children collapse in pain had little effect on Pyo Wall. As he approached Li Min, he could not understand why he alone remained unaffected. At that moment, he decided he needed to uncover the reason. Placing his hand on Li Min's back, he closed his eyes. He knew that infusing energy into another's body was dangerous, but since she also practiced the thunder-splitting technique, he believed it would not harm her. As he transferred his energy, a faint light appeared on her back. He wondered why he was different from the others. They ate the same food, lived in the same environment, and practiced the same martial arts. Then, a memory struck him, the time he was bitten by a snake and survived its venom. Over the years, his body had developed resistance to poison. If the mentors had used venom as a restraint, that might explain why he remained unaffected. Still, a question lingered. How could the mentors activate the poison in so many children at once? Sound alone could not achieve that. He guessed that what they carried inside was not venom but poisonous insects hidden in their food, now awakened by the sound of the flute. Before he could think further, he heard footsteps and voices outside. Assassins were approaching the fallen children. For a moment, Pyo Wall considered fleeing, but he quickly realized that if he stood out as the only one unaffected, the mentors would discover his resistance. So he collapsed onto the ground, pretending to writhe in pain like the others. One assassin passed by and, seeing him struggle, shouted his name. Within moments, the first sword, Lim Sayel, arrived. Without hesitation, Lim Sayel drew his blade and pressed it into Pyo Wall's shoulder, causing him to cry out in pain. Leaning close, he demanded to know what Pyo Wall had seen in his study. The boy only screamed and gave no answer. Lim Sayel narrowed his eyes, realizing Pyo Wall had been hiding his abilities all this time. Deciding he was too dangerous, he prepared to finish him off. Just then, the second sword intervened. He argued that Pyo Wall's skills were too valuable to waste. They would need him for the coming mission, and besides, the Hell Flute ensured he could still be controlled. Reluctantly, Lim Sayel pulled back his blade. He ordered the assassins to administer the antidote. Soon, a bitter powder was forced into the noses of all the children. Slowly, They regained their strength, though confused and shaken. Lim Sayul then declared coldly that their suffering was Pyo Wall's fault. If he had not infiltrated their base, none of this would have happened. With a threatening glare, he warned that any who repeated such defiance would endure the same agony again. Later, Pyo Wall sat by a stone wall, meditating. He remembered the second sword's words, realizing the snake venom in his body had weakened the poison's effect. Inwardly, he felt relief that he had escaped the mentor's control. Meanwhile, Li Min, along with Yowal and So Gyeoksun, went searching for him, carrying torches through the dark corridor. Yowal was disgusted by the grim place Pyo Wall chose to stay, while Gyeoksun remarked that no one could truly know what was in his mind. They also noted that most of the children now resented him. Suddenly, Pyo Wall appeared silently behind them, startling them all. When he asked why they were searching for him, Yowal explained that they wanted to talk about the restrainer. She revealed her suspicion that he had not been affected like the others. Li Min too recalled that when she was overwhelmed by pain, someone had infused her with inner energy. She realized it had been Pyo Wall. When asked directly, Pyo Wall admitted he knew what kind of restrainer was inside them. The others begged him to explain, but he questioned why he should. What benefit would it bring him? This angered Gyeoksun, who argued that they were comrades. Pyo Wall scoffed, saying true comrades would not have pursued and attacked him before. Feeling guilty, Gyeoksun swore that from now on, he will never abandon him and will always consider him a friend. Yowal and Li Min added their voices, declaring they too would regard him as a friend and never betray him. For the first time, Pyo Wall smiled faintly, though his tone remained indifferent. He then revealed the truth. Their bodies carried curse poison, a type of poisonous organism. Under normal conditions, it remained dormant, but when triggered by the sound of the flute, it released toxins that attacked their organs. When asked why he was unaffected, he explained simply that he had developed resistance to poison. Pyo Wall told them that since they now understood, they should work to find a way to overcome it themselves. Inwardly, he thought it better to create many variables. If even one child broke free of the poison, it could change everything. Li Min gazed at him with wonder, realizing how mysterious he was. Before leaving, Yowal promised that if Pyo Wall ever needed help, she would be there. Li Min then stayed behind, quietly telling him her real name, Lim Sayulman. Looking at him with sincerity, she asked him to remember it. After speaking, Li Solman turned and left, leaving Pyo Wall in a state of surprise. Soon, all the children were gathered in one place as the first sword stood before them. He announced that they would finally be leaving the cave. The single thought in every child's mind was finally, though none dared say it aloud. He then called Yowal forward, instructing her that once he and the mentors left, she would be responsible for leading the children outside. Yowal was pleased with the task and readily accepted. A basket descended from the ceiling once more, and the mentors climbed in before rising upward. Watching them go, First Sword wondered how many of the children would survive. Though he acknowledged their strength, he knew their target was the most talented martial artist in all of Jonghu. Survival would not be easy. But it was no longer his concern. His role had ended, and he was ready to retire. Once the mentors were gone, the children cheered at the thought of finally escaping. Yowal quickly took charge, pointing out that the basket could only hold so many at once. She organized them into groups, sending Cholfyang, Jinsam, and others first. As the basket ascended, Pyo Wall looked up at the light above, still unable to believe they were truly leaving after 7 long years. Yowal approached him and remarked that they would likely soon be given a mission. Pyo Wall agreed and asked about the curse poison. Yowal explained that many had overcome him thanks to Li Min, who knew much about poisons. Her words shocked Pyo Wall. He hadn't expected Li Min to hold such knowledge. Soon, most of the children had been taken up, leaving only a few behind. Yowal gathered them into the basket, and as it rose, Pyo Wall stared at the dark cavern below. To him, this place had not just been hell, it had been the very embodiment of it. As they neared the surface, Gyeoksun shouted in joy. But Pyo Wall suddenly tore strips from his clothing, fashioned a blindfold, and warned the others to cover their eyes or risk being blinded by the light. They obeyed at once, tying cloth around their eyes. Only Gyeoksun hesitated, covering his face too late. When they reached the top, he winced painfully against the brightness. The basket came to a stop, and a shadow appeared before them. A man's silhouette stood against the light, but his face remained hidden. In a cold, emotionless voice, he remarked that they had indeed produced some useful subjects. Pyo Wall immediately memorized his voice. This man was none other than Gu Juyang, the leader of the Blood Shadow Group. At his order, the children were placed into a wagon and transported to a manor where they would prepare for the outside world. Juyang warned them not to grow complacent, vowing to personally eliminate anyone who became lazy. Later, Pyo Wall shared a room with Go Shinnok and Gyeoksun. Wanting to remain unnoticed, he quietly told them he preferred not to draw attention. Gyeoksun laughed, asking if anyone even planned to notice him. Pyo Wall gave a faint smile in return. Stepping outside, he washed himself at a nearby well. The cool water refreshed his body, and afterward he lay beneath the night sky, savoring the moonlight, the breeze, and the peace of finally being free from the cave. The next morning, the children ran outside, their spirits bright. Some washed at the well while others wandered about. A group of boys found a yellow flower, marveling at its beauty. One even wept with joy, overwhelmed that he could once again admire something so simple. Watching them, Pyo Wall couldn't help but smile. But the warm moment ended when a man approached, crushing the flower beneath his boot. He tossed blades onto the grass, saying the children would now be given weapons and must keep them safe, as they would need them soon. Pyo Wall's expression darkened with displeasure at the sight.